Dear colleagues, dear guests, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences. I'm Tuula Teeri and I'm president of the Academy. Ever since EVA was founded more than 100 years ago, we have been an academy with strong international networks and strong international perspectives. Our first international fellow was elected already in 1924, and in the early 40s we sent staff to the US. Today these operations are still ongoing and labeled Science and Innovation Counselors. We have always also been an academy that includes the young, the next generation and their perspectives. And to enforce this to the fullest, we have a student council, students of science, engineering and economy that are invited to participate in our activities and also in our governance. We are very eager to acknowledge the initiatives and engagement of our student members and also others that come to us with future perspectives in an international frame. And today, I'm extra proud now to give the floor to Clara Hernblom from the Student Council and Gabriel Granström, who is an alumnus of the Vinnova Wallenberg Fellows program in Silicon Valley. So Clara and Gabriel, the floor is yours. Welcome.
My clicker. So welcome, and I want to introduce myself before I leave the word to you. My name is Paulina Modlitba. I have the huge honor of being the moderator today. I've been asked by EVA and by the students to be the host, ask questions, and probably, hopefully, learn a lot about generative AI as well. So I'm looking forward to this. But first, let's learn a little bit more about sort of who you are. Tuula already mentioned the sort of organizations that you represent. So Clara, can you please tell us about sort of a little bit more about yourself, but also about the Student Council and sort of the role of the council?
Yes, so my name is Clara and I'm a part of the EVA Student Council, and I'm a student at the Swedish University of Agriculture Science, and I'm studying the Master of Science in Forestry program. Yes. So a bit of EVA then. EVA Student Council, it's it's a platform for socially engaged students, economics, business and engineering students from all over Sweden. And this year we are 13 students representative for over 9 Swedish universities. So it's a place where you can meet like-minded individuals, test ideas and practice skills, and our aim is to engage in the EVA Academy's work with the hope of shaping the future of Sweden.
Exciting. And Gabriel, what about you?
Yes, so my name is Gabriel Granström, and I am here representing the Vinnova Wallenberg Fellowship Alumni Network. But if I'm not doing that, I am a strategic project manager at the Knowledge Foundation here in Stockholm. And the Vinnova Wallenberg Fellowship Program, that is a scholarship program funded by the Wallenberg Foundation, giving young professionals as well as senior innovation experts the opportunity to engage in the Silicon Valley innovation ecosystem, to study at Nordic Innovation House in Palo Alto, to gain valuable knowledge about the Silicon Valley ecosystem, gaining knowledge networks and important insights to bring back into the Swedish innovation ecosystem as well afterwards.
Sounds amazing. So tell us a little bit about sort of the project of hosting this event and designing this event. In what way is this event sort of part of what you've been doing? It's an open question, so.
Yeah, so for us in EVA Student Council, I think both us included in this project and the council in whole, I think it's a very topic subject. There's something AI and higher education. There is something we're discussing a lot and thinking about. And so it's very spot on for us. Yes.
Yes, and for us alumni is at the from the Vinnova Wallenberg Fellowship program. This is very much Silicon Valley right now at the moment. The discussion about generative AI is on everyone's lips. So that's why this topic is very, very interesting for us and to gain even more knowledge about this.
And so my next question was supposed to be, so why did you choose this topic? But we already sort of covered it. Do you want to add anything to it?
I think we're in our constellation, we're having different backgrounds, but I think we all could agree that we are interested in this subject. So it's
yeah. I think we all are, right?
Yeah.
How excited are you? Very. So we will talk both about sort of the larger sort of paint, you know, with the sort of paint a broader picture of this topic, but also eventually, quite soon, one of your colleagues will show us and teach us some of the more sort of hands-on how to actually use ChatGPT in education. So thank you for now. You'll be back later.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. So now, Erik Sundberg, who's also part of the Vinnova Wallenberg Fellowship program, is here to do a demo. And for those of us who have been part of education, where sort of educational programs where you have to demo stuff, we all know that we can't, you know, the demo bug, we can't demo live because things go wrong. So you prepared a presentation that shows sort of people what they can do.
Exactly. So I only have a few minutes here, but I wanted to get a very hands-on approach of what AI is capable of right now. This is not the future. This is not the theoretical discussion of what students will be able to do in a few years. This is what students are able to do right now. And maybe that can spark some thoughts on then how we can manage that if there's indeed something to manage. So yes, I'm a student at Uppsala University, but I am also an alumnus. I was actually in Silicon Valley this past November when all craziness ensued with ChatGPT launching. So I was in the eye of the storm seeing this unfold. So that is not the click. That is not the click. This is a very advanced.
Yeah, it's a laser.
I have a laser. Do I have a clicker?
Yeah, now.
Okay. I don't know what I did. We'll see if I can repeat it. So, a small audience survey. First of all, who here has used ChatGPT ever? Okay, most people. Not everyone, but most people. That is backwards. Is there a forward? Should I just say slide?
That green.
There we go. Thank you. Who here has used ChatGPT 4? So for context, ChatGPT 4, so all the hullabaloo that came out in last November, that was ChatGPT 3.5. And that was capable, but ChatGPT 4 is leaps and bounds beyond that. So what ChatGPT 4 is capable of today is probably not at all what you used when you tried it out the first time last year. So just keep that in mind for the rest of the discussions here. Last question, who's a frequent user of ChatGPT of any form? Or similar large language models? Okay, so still a few. Very good. These are all from last November. The college essay is dead. The home assignments of all shapes and forms are not going to ever be able to look the same way. There's obviously a discussion, a debate about, the capabilities. Is it actually as good as we think it is? Oh, I can spot, I'm a teacher, and I can spot exactly when ChatGPT is used. They think, although studies show that actually they're not as good as they think they are. But whether or not, like, what is true in this debate, it's clear that there's no turning back the clock. The cat is out of the box. So let's just show a concrete example. I'm actually not going to do the whole, please write me this essay using this specific instruction. That is possible, but let's instead see maybe how it can be used as a tool for learning. So you can have it, you can receive personalized feedback on your writing. So I'm saying here, I'm writing an article summarizing and analyzing various group dynamics models. Here's the post. So I wrote my own post first, full, much longer than you can see there. And then I asked ChatGPT could you provide feedback as well as concrete suggestions for improvements? Is there anything wordy? Can we cut things out? And ChatGPT said, first of all, it gave me some compliments. I love that. Said, your article is comprehensive and well-structured, covering the key aspects, blah, blah, blah. And then it provided a few areas. Okay, so here, some things in the introduction. You could hook the reader. Here's an example. Here's some points of critique. Maybe you were too nice to these theories that you were talking about. Maybe you should have offered a counterpoint. So while this model has its critics, alternative model, et cetera, is something it suggests I could use. It goes concretely into the language and style, saying, you could simplify this, you could be more consistent in the naming here. And sort of as a summary, overall, your article is informative, but implementing these things could make it more engaging and reader-friendly. And the interesting here is, this is not a one-off, right? I can ask this, wait, what did you mean by this? Or actually, the language and style, could you just write 300 pages giving me specific points on my language and style, right? It will just do as much as you ask it to do. It never tires. But it's more than just text. Here is this, if you've ever studied math at an engineering institution in Sweden, flervariabel-analys, it's super fun, multivariable calculus. But so how can I make ChatGPT interact with this? Well, ChatGPT 4 has something called plugins. So I can ask ChatGPT to read PDFs from, let's say, a previous exam. So here it reads my PDF. I'd like to upload these. Yes, of course, I'll upload them. And then it says, how can I assist you further with these documents? Would you like to ask specific questions about the content, for example? And then I'm asking, okay, so for question number 1, I don't really get what they mean by utöka till en funktion i hela planet. And I sort of mixed Swedish and English. I didn't specify like how it should deal with that. It immediately read the PDF, or it said, this is the question you were referring to. To address your specific concern, it gave me a few ideas, a few pointers, and then it asked, would you like assistance further in solving this problem? I'm like, actually, yes, I'm still curious. So how do I then check this function if it is continuous in the whole plane? How should I think about this when receiving a similar exam question? So I'm already like sort of specifying what my target is here. And then it says, well, these are some strategies, and it's actually a 6-point list here, very detailed, like here's how you should break down or could break down the problem. But then it says, would you want to do this together? Sort of this example, would you want to go through it together? Enthusiastically, I say, yes, of course. Very practical. I think what you're probably seeing here, importantly, it's not just a solutions provider giving you all the answers. It's a dialogue partner. It's a teaching assistant with infinite patience, infinite access to the previous knowledge that has been on the topic. Yes, it might not always be correct. Sometimes you actually can spot specific mistakes it makes, but you can always have a conversation and lead it back on track. And actually, that dialogue and sort of being critical of when it's right and not, helps you in the learning process. Some final thoughts here, just to leave off this part. I want to encourage you all, especially, well, if you're a frequent user, amazing, keep using it, but also, you can't regulate or restrict, or I would say even talk in depth about something you don't really have a hands-on understanding of. And I bet if you tried using this today or tomorrow, it can help you solve a problem that you are working with on a daily basis, and it will probably do a much better job than you think. So maybe it's time to onboard your AI intern. That's a phrase coined by the associate professor at Wharton, Ethan Mollick, and he basically says, well, there is this weird alien thing that can do all this work for you all the time. It's your infinite energy intern. Maybe you should start thinking about how to implement this in your life. Maybe it won't be perfect at first. Maybe you actually have a learning process. You're not a perfect manager. You're not a perfect boss at your first job or your first time. But you will improve. You'll build a skill set managing this AI that will then help you further on when these models improve. Because here's my final point, and I want this to be a clear takeaway message here. AI, right now, that I showed you, it is the least competent it will ever be. So next time you use it, it will probably be better than it is today. So get going, start using ChatGPT or other things, and hopefully learn what we should do it and how we should think about it in, well, things like higher education and learning. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Erik. Actually, after using ChatGPT, I feel like the intern. It's already so much smarter than me, so it's surpassing my intelligence, and it will only get smarter. Thank you so much for that hands-on guide. And now we're moving over to sort of discussing the larger picture. And we have the huge honor of inviting Professor Patrick Wolfe from the USA. He's with us via Teams. I can see your face now. A warm welcome. So for those of you who don't know Professor Patrick Wolfe, he is Provost and Executive Vice President of Academic Affairs and Diversity at Purdue University. And he's here to initially give us some thoughts around sort of using AI for higher education. After that, we will have a conversation with Amy, who's here as well. And you will also be part of a panel at the end. So we will see a lot of you, and I'm excited about that. So take it away.
Great, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. Even more enjoyable if I could be there in person, but this makes it slightly easier probably for all of us. I really enjoyed the points that were made by Erik just a little bit earlier, as well as the rest of the team and all of our student presenters. I think, as with many topics of contemporary interest, the details may vary from different regions, different parts of the world, different legal systems, different educational institutions, but we're all kind of facing across the globe the same equalizing opportunities that things like ChatGPT, large language models, and generative AI overall sort of afford us. So I thought I would start, just by making a small analogy to keep in mind. Some of you may be of the generation where you used the slide rules in schools. That's räknesticka, I think, if my Swedish doesn't fail me too badly. And that's, of course, what one used to do quick calculations before the advent of calculators. And then calculators were sort of large machines that you weren't very portable, and then eventually pocket calculators came to be part of everyone's high school and undergraduate education. And just like with calculators, I think in education generally, we need to see generative AI as a kind of a partner and a tool that we learn to work with, rather than necessarily something that we see as adversarial to our aims overall than teaching and learning. And hopefully that doesn't oversimplify things, but if you think about it right now, none of us would expect that that students don't use calculators or computers to help them learn and understand better physics and chemistry and calculus and lots of branches of the natural sciences. There may be situations where we ask students to take an exam, written or oral exam, without the benefit of a computer or a calculator. But I think we see these for years and decades now as tools and techniques to enhance learning. not as sort of enemies that need to be overcome. So that's sort of the approach that I would think that many of us will take to generative AI as it impacts teaching and learning. And maybe what's just so challenging right now is, and I think Erik alluded to this, just how quickly these techniques have permeated the public consciousness. So what do I mean? Well, there is a threshold effect with many of these new technologies. If you think back to something a little bit simpler like voice recognition and speech recognition, many countries, and Sweden among them, put hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars and euro and krona into research on speech recognition, starting in the 1960s, even before the advent of digital computers. And research continued through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And even in the early 2000s, speech recognition was only useful in very limited contexts. So medical doctors would often use speech recognition to transcribe their notes, and speech recognition would work on a very specialized vocabulary, which included, a number of medical terms that you would not find in ordinary conversation. So speech recognition took 50 years worth of work by the global research community, and still was not commercially viable for general public use. And then at some point, we exceeded a threshold, and you'll probably remember this with your smartphone. Speech recognition started to work almost well enough to be useful, and then even today, you can easily record and transcribe voice memos on your smartphone, and the accuracy is not 100%, but it's above a kind of threshold to prove to be useful. So these generative AI is in much the same boat. Decades and decades of research and billions and billions in investment, finally culminating in commercial viability, along with enormous amounts of training information and data, and the sort of cheap and scalable commodity computing resources necessary to train these large language models, whether it's just language or whether it's images and sounds as well as text. And suddenly we've kind of reached the threshold where all of these things really turn out to be useful. So I'll just leave you with that sort of context, which I think applies, again, anywhere across the world. The training requires enormous amounts of resources, but once the models are built and packaged, they're really a sort of equalizer. And just like we saw with smartphones, countries and economies that might not have had an enormous wired infrastructure can leapfrog and go straight to the benefits provided by a big wireless infrastructure. I think we'll see the same with ChatGPT and generative AI. You don't need to have the resources available necessarily to train these models on the entire internet in order to do something useful. So let me just kind of maybe spend the last several minutes here to keep us on time for the top of the hour, talking about the trends that we're seeing right now in higher education. And the details may look and feel a little bit different if we're talking about Sweden or the United Kingdom or North America, but the essence of the opportunities and the challenges is the same. I would say that most universities are not able to move fast enough to understand all of the implications of these new technologies. And before we understand all the implications, before we adjust our policies for teaching and learning, we have to sort of understand the implications, reflect those implications back, and start to arrive at thoughtful judgments about how we incorporate generative AI into our mechanisms and modalities for teaching and learning. So I'll give you some examples in a couple of minutes, but I think one constant across the world is nobody, once these tools are in the hands of people and of students and of educators everywhere, no university, no large organization is fast enough to keep up with all the ways that these tools can be used, creatively used, misused, everything you can think of. I would sort of say a second point that every university is thinking about, again, as my analogy with calculators, it's one thing to give our instructors the best available opportunity to make sure that students are learning on a level playing field and everyone has access to the same technologies and opportunities. But it's another thing to expect our educators to know how to set policy around the use of generative AI in the classroom, outside of the classroom, preparing for exams, all of the things that Erik talked about. I think every university educator shares the common goal of wanting to help students learn to the best of their collective abilities and to embrace new technology in a positive partnership to help do that. I think where it's a little more complicated is when we start to think about assessment, which is the last part of the learning feedback loop, where we check back and make sure that everyone has learned and understood and absorbed the facts and theories and details that we thought they have. And you can think about this inside of a university environment, but it's also, as Erik pointed out, making the rounds as students are getting ready to prepare to apply to enter university, and similarly as students are preparing to exit university and think about how they stand out in whether it's advanced degree study or the job market or, I don't know, internship with government or things like that. So I think most universities, and certainly Purdue is included here, we are trying our best to work with our students and come up with answers to the questions formed by generative AI in partnership with our students, often working through student government, but also finding students who want to be innovative and entrepreneurial. And wouldn't it be wonderful if something like the next version of a Facebook or what have you, Facebook or Google, emerged from a clever, innovative student at any one of the world's many universities. And we have some opportunity to do that probably in this coming year, simply because, as I said, there's no way that any large organization can actually come up with a self-consistent set of policies and regulation to help with generative AI. So let me just finish with a few concluding remarks, and I'll kind of get us back to our timetable here with some questions, question and answer session after this. A few strong research universities have already released some reports. One that you might be interested in taking a look at is from the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. They're a quite recognized leading world university, and there's nothing I've said in this presentation that isn't echoed in the conclusions from the leadership at the University of Michigan, and most universities, I think, will end up in the same place in thinking about generative AI. The second thing I would just emphasize is one layer below everything that I've said, there are lots of challenges to think about. So here at Purdue, we had a student who very quickly trained a large language model on lots of accessible data from Purdue. Some of this is behind, the university password protected system. And so quickly there's questions about copyright and ownership and intellectual property and trademarking and all these kind of things. And I think, we and every other university are committed to helping our students be thoughtful and creative and innovative about all of this, but also recognizing that there are all kinds of policy and regulatory questions lurking kind of right below the surface that all of us across the globe are going to have to get a handle on. And that's something that I think will probably, based on historical trends, will probably look and feel a little bit different, well, whether we're talking about North America or the United Kingdom or Western Europe or different pockets of universities across the rest of the world. So let me sort of stop there. Again, it's a very fast-moving area. I think we're really right to look to the students to help us think through how these tools can be used thoughtfully and not to have any sort of quick knee-jerk reactions to try to sort of collectively hide from the advance of these technologies. They're very much here and here to stay, and it behooves us to be thoughtful in working closely with our students to figure out how we put them to best use. Otherwise, I think it will just be a very crowded landscape without a lot of guidance, and that's as Erik said, when ChatGPT kind of hit the world, I think that's what it felt like for students and professors alike. Let me stop there, and happy to answer questions. I think first from our moderator, and then maybe eventually from the audience. And I'll turn it back over to you, Paulina and Amy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's welcome Professor Amy Loutfi up on stage to join us for a conversation.
Thank you.
What are your initial thoughts, Amy?
Oh, well, I have so many when it comes to this, because also being an educator, being a researcher in AI, I sympathize with many of the sort of reflections that Patrick was making. And also being a user, I liked your sort of poll to the audience, and I raised my hand quite a bit. A user of ChatGPT myself.
Do you have a favorite use case? Like what has become your favorite way of using ChatGPT?
Yeah, I have to. This is maybe the typical professor example, but normally I write text and then I ask ChatGPT to shorten it.
Oh.
So please, rewrite my text, but do it in fewer words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, I think. As Patrick is mentioning, we are really at a very interesting impasse when it comes to higher education and how higher education contends with this type of technology. And really the key is not to have these knee-jerk reactions, and I quote it from you because I really think that that's true. It's easy to get caught up in the frenzy, and what we need to do here is we need to reflect. And perhaps slowly adapt. I think there is some value to that. And engage in dialogue, particularly with our students, but also as a faculty. I love that word, faculty.
Yeah.
To really engage in dialogue with each other to see how we cope.
I love the word partnership, which you refer to a lot, Patrick. So sort of faculty, students in a partnership. Sort of designing the way forward for using these tools. I also love the fact that you mentioned sort of the importance of everyone having access to this technology. So we sort of can't stop it, but we have to make sure that everyone has access to it, because, if not, there will be huge inequalities. And I know that sort of matter is close to your heart as well. Okay. Amy, can you sort of elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when it comes to technology, and particularly when it comes to areas like AI and machine learning, we see that the field itself is not so diverse. It's dominated by one gender, and we need to do more in order to make sure that we can sort of bring the development teams that are very diverse and inclusive into these fields. Now, it could be that these kinds of technologies also awaken and spark interest from a wider group. So that's one way. But it also is the fact that we want to make sure that these technologies are accessible to everybody. that they're not these design decisions that perhaps exclude certain groups. So diversity and inclusion across the board when it comes to technology development and adoption is absolutely necessary.
Yeah. So Patrick, one of your areas of expertise is diversity. What are your more specific views on this, and how do you push these matters forward? Because we've seen data that it's a majority of the people who are exploring these tools are men. So what can we do about it?
Yeah, I think to Amy's point, I think it's more of a both and type of strategy than an either or. I mean, one thing that's maybe worth talking about a little bit is just how quickly these technologies start to permeate other areas. So, already at a place like Purdue, we have a big initiative on AI and ethics, another on AI and policy, and a third, a new joint degree across AI and philosophy. And so bringing in other fields is one way that we can immediately, rebalance a little bit the set of people who are sitting around the table engaging with these technologies. At the same time, I think, Amy's point was absolutely right. AI happens to be in my own technical background, and so I know full well that, all of these techniques, machine learning techniques that are trained on past data, they reflect exactly everything that's gone into every recipe. So you'll remember several years ago on Google, if you asked for an image of a CEO and typed into Google, you'd get back lots of images of white men because that's what Google had been trained on. And, eventually Google engineers started inserting themselves into the machine learning loop to make appropriate adjustments. So I think we also have to be very proactive about encouraging the next generation of students to get interested in these technologies. And that means kind of addressing the representation gap and making sure that not everybody who's in front of audiences talking about these technical advances is, all from one background, whether it's race or gender or socioeconomic status or anything like that. But I think it's a multi-pronged strategy. I think we have to do all of these things at the same time, and change takes time. But at the same time, we need to have actions on different time scales. If you look at other areas of science and engineering, change has come. You can look at the senior faculty at a place relative to the junior faculty to see some of that. But I do think it has to be a comprehensive, multi-pronged strategy, or else we're just perpetuating the same set of challenges. I'll stop there.
Any thoughts about that, Amy? The and/or approach?
No, I fully agree that, we need to actively work with these issues. And I think that's something educators are becoming more and more attuned to, and also AI and system developers are becoming attuned to.
So we partly invited Patrick to get the American perspective on these matters, also because you're wise in general, but to sort of add the American perspective. Is there a difference? This is a global matter, of course, but is there a difference between the sort of Swedish-European take on this, or sort of the matters that we have considered versus the American way?
So I think when it comes to academia and how we're kind of in this bit of a existential crisis of how to cope with generative AI in terms of teaching, I think that this is something that is a global phenomenon. But when it comes to the deployment of these technologies, I think that there are some differences in how we view regulation.
Yeah.
And here I would say not only the Swedish, but perhaps the European perspective, we are coming out of sort of a cloud of being regulated in the digital space. With, for example, GDPR, we've experienced what that does, both good and bad and ugly, I dare to say. But we also see that, it is possible. It is possible to take steps towards regulation. And we also now have the AI Act, and we'll see how that sort of permeates into our everyday lives. And I'm anticipating or excited to see how the American sort of landscape will address these issues. And I think that they're sort of a little bit, I don't want to use the word behind because it's very negative, but I think they're starting on their journey towards regulation.
Yeah. Any sort of comments on that, Patrick? The Biden-Harris administration is proactive as far as I've seen in the news.
Yeah, no, I think Amy's assessment was very accurate. I spent much of my career in Great Britain previous to Brexit, and so I've kind of seen both sides of this up close. GDPR is a fascinating example of how differently this can play out. There was also an article today in one of the major U.S. newspapers talking about the upcoming antitrust case, which involves Google and some others. And in theory, these antitrust cases are about the past behavior, whether it constituted a monopoly or not. But in practice, this article pointed out they're always about the future. And in this case, it's very much about the future of AI and probably who will have first mover advantage to deploy AI in various ways across the United States. So I think it's absolutely, as Amy said, different countries and cultures have different set points about trade-offs between privacy and the collective good, safety and security, innovation, entrepreneurship relative to other things. And the U.S. has tended to be at a different place on that curve than necessarily Western Europe as a whole. I think what will be really, really interesting is to see how the flows of investment in entrepreneurial companies might change as a result of how these landscapes evolve in different places. That'll be really, really interesting to see how that starts to play out, I think.
Yeah, and here I'd like to bounce back to something that Erik said, which is you can't regulate something that you don't understand. Yeah. And I think you can, but you won't do a very good job at it. So, I mean, the risk is regulating something you don't understand means that you might actually end up stifling, for example, innovation.
Is GDPR maybe an example of
yeah,
that?
maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, a very good point.
Well, I would add to that. I mean, that's one more reason I think that we have a responsibility as educators to get involved with and engage with public policymakers and regulators, present and future, through our students. Some of our students will go on to be policymakers. It's just not fair to expect somebody who's been practicing law, for example, for 40 years to know intuitively what an algorithm is. And it's hard to think about case law playing out for something like GDPR when you have professions involved that didn't have an opportunity to learn about these things as part of their undergraduate experiences. So it's partly, I think, about engaging with policymakers now, but also about thinking, what do we need to be doing to train the next generation of policymakers and leaders to have some modicum of understanding of these fast-changing technologies, just exactly to the point that both of you just made.
Yeah. So we need interdisciplinary teams more than ever.
That's true.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for now. And I was actually mistaken. You're leaving us now, Patrick, but thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciated hearing your thoughts on this.
My pleasure. It was so nice to join. I wish you a good rest of the conversation, and thanks again for inviting me.
Yeah, bye-bye. Okay. But we will see more of you,
exactly.
Of course.
I'll be back.
Yes, get some rest. All right, so that was the US outlook and a little bit of European outlook. And now it's time for us to go back to Sweden and have a look at the more local sort of view on this. And I have the huge honor of welcoming Christian Stöhr. He's an associate professor and director of studies at the Department of Engineering and Education at Chalmers. And we invited you because we all read about this survey that you made among students about their sort of view on using generative AI, ChatGPT, etc. in studies. And you're here to share some of the insights from that survey.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, very good. So thank you for this invitation in this fantastic place. Pleasure to be here. So, and I'm basically going to talk about Erik, yes, what he was representing, the excitement about the AI, how we can use it for learning. And the question is Erik representing all the Swedish students or just a couple of, yeah? So, because if you look at, before the summer, if you look at the newspapers in higher education, you were more likely seeing something like that. It's in Swedish, but I think most of you, yeah? So it's this kind of worry, students are going to use it for cheating, and there were a few cases, and yeah. But it's also this thing, as this professor says, what is cheating with ChatGPT? It's not trivial to answer that question, yeah? It's not like plagiarism, yeah? So those are the kind of things that happened before summer. And they were stimulating us to basically do a survey all over Sweden to get a better picture. So how do students actually think about the whole matter, and how are they using AI? So we put on a questionnaire. We got close to 6,000 responses, almost all Swedish universities represented. We had a little comment at the end, yeah? So do you have, yeah, and like you do in good questionnaires, yeah, anything you want to add? And we got an amazing amount of comments, well-reflected comments discussing how they use and how things. So it's a topic that people are interested in. I need to say it's not representative in a statistical sense, but if you look at like background variables like gender and things like that, it mirrors the Swedish student population quite well. So we are quite confident. There's a little code if you want to look at the report itself. I'm also going to put it up at the end. And I was very happy that even today there are a few students that were answering this question. All right, so I also just have 5 minutes, so I just want to go through some of the key findings. So here we have questions about the usage, and one thing that really sticks out is it's ChatGPT that is driving this whole thing. So there's a list of other AI-based chatbots, and you see the clear difference here from ChatGPT. The black one is people, like a third is actually using it regularly. Over 50% have been using it at all the students, and almost 95% at least are familiar, know what it is. Yeah, and that's a clear driver. We also ask about other language tools like Google Translate and speech-to-text AI-based language tools, and they're also quite familiar. So I already got ahead of myself. Those were the points that I'm trying to make, keeping the time in mind. All right, and then we talked a bit about attitude. So we put up a bunch of statements and asked for a kind of agreement. On the left, the dark one is agreement. In the middle is I don't know, I'm not sure. And the green one is disagreement. And again, I'm just going to go through a few things that I found interesting. So one is that most students were positive about using AI in education. Yes, and here we talk about chatbots. In reality, ChatGPT. That's what we're assuming. Yes, and a large majority is also against prohibiting it. It was you were pointing out, Erik, that's not possible. I would say that's not how everybody thinks. There are several universities considering not allowing use of generative AI in education. Whether it's enforceable, I would be very skeptic, but at least there's a discussion like that. All right. We also have, that students feel like using generative AI as ChatGPT for assignments or exams is cheating. So there seems to be kind of an ethical awareness among our students. However, 1 out of 4 doesn't think like that. Further, and that's a little bit more this kind of positive spirit, and it's more what Amy and Patrick were going towards the end. Yeah. There are, of course, also quite some concerns to address. Yeah, our students they're concerned how the AI will impact their jobs, their education, and their role into that. And that, comparing this to the positives, that there seems to be a little bit of a divide that we need to address, and that's an important point with all enthusiasm that we have that we shouldn't forget. All right. So, and Lastly, and again, it's reflecting Erik in a way. So when we look at what students thought about, it's more about like using generative AI for learning, yeah, to improve your ability to learn, make you more effective as a learner, rather than just getting better grades. Yes. So that was that. And the point that was also addressed is that was in May when the survey was. So I would hope that it looks a little bit better. Those were the questions. So are there any rules and regulations from university? What do you do with this? And here, less than 1 out of 5 students was aware of something like that. Again, one would assume that that has changed, but the new term has started, so it remains to be seen. Yes, and we can have a discussion on that. So those were kind of the points that I thought was worth making. I already mentioned we had quite a number of comments, so I just put a few in. We're doing an extra analysis of all of those. Just a little bit the spectrum. Yeah, we already talked about the metaphor of the calculator. So yes, just because new technology is entering, that's not going to change education. So there is this kind of thing, which is there's a strong demand that university, we as educators should adapt to that. It's also this kind of usage that comes from that we see a lot, that you can use ChatGPT as kind of a teacher replacement, as a personal assistant to improve your learning. And Erik made an excellent example how to do this. We also, and that's maybe something also worth mentioning, for students with special needs, generative AI can be a strong support. And then the last student was somebody making a prediction that, like home exams, that I'm as an educator, I wanted this SARS tent, this large examination. Yeah, we were fighting for that. It's not pedagogical. It's not measuring. AI is working against that. So this kind of home, and we see that teachers go back to that as at least temporary safety measure. And lastly, the last comment is basically just asking for that. That we need to come up with rules and how to help students, how to deal with that. I just want to add, if I have 30 seconds, because it was the discussion. My perception is that the ministry, with the question, so what are we supposed to do? They said, the Mats Persson, I have a huge trust that the universities will be able to solve that. The universities said, yeah, we cannot generalize that, so we give it to our teachers. They will solve that. And that's where it is. And there is an argument to be made. It's very individual, but we do need to support our teachers in doing that, because now it's not just people that have been working with AI. It's pretty much any teacher. Yeah. And with that, I finish. Thank you.
Thank you. That's actually a great question for the panel afterwards, right?
So I'll just go.
Yes. That was me being, a nice way of throwing you off the stage. Because now it's time for me to invite Professor Loutfi back on stage to do a short talk. And then we'll invite some of the participants back on stage, and we'll have a joint conversation. So.
Excellent, yes. Yeah, and it was actually a very good segue into my talk, because what I'd like to do is just take a few minutes to describe how we're working with education and competence development in AI, particularly at the universities. And I just want to remind everyone about the AI ecosystem in Sweden, because I think it's a very impressive ecosystem where we're trying to fill in all the necessary gaps and make sure that this ecosystem can work well together. So we have research investments, particularly from the Wallenberg Foundations, that are going to several of the universities to try and strengthen foundational research. We have education initiatives, and those are the ones that I want to focus on in the next few minutes, where we have the universities who are partnering together in order to look at how do we work with education and AI, both in terms of integrating more AI into our education, but how do we also look at lifelong learning. And then there are initiatives like AI Sweden that are looking at how do we actually operationalize AI, and how do we feed AI into the world out there, both in terms of industry, but as well as the public sector. And as above that, we also have how the municipalities and the regions are working with their AI uptake. So this is like the ecosystem that we currently have in Sweden, and I'm sure you've heard many different voices representing many different of these different actors. And I want to, as I say, focus a little bit on that orange block, and in particular talk about how we're working with AI in higher education. Now, you mentioned a little bit about what the students thought, and we saw some very nice examples how students can use AI, and Patrick lifted up the challenge of assessment. So I thought this picture actually is very interesting to sort of tie things all together, which gives you kind of a view of how well the GPTs do. So the differences between GPT 3.5 and 4 on these standardized tests and how they look across the different disciplines. So for example, the blue line is showing the performance of an exam result of GPT 3.5 in different areas. So if you look, for example, in environmental science, you can use GPT 3.5 and get really good results. If we're in calculus, well, 3.5 wasn't so good, but as we heard today, GPT-4 will do a much better job. And you can see how the different areas, they vary. And perhaps there are some surprises here for some of you. I was a little bit surprised at the English language result, that it wasn't higher. And this is something that is really challenging us as educators. How do we cope with the fact that our tools to do assessments are no longer holding in this AI context? And because of this, there was an initiative, I should say, that was really driven by one of the Wallenberg Foundations, so the Marianne and Marcus Wallenberg Foundation, that gave the challenge to its large research program supporting AI development, so WASP and WASP-HS, to take a look at education and to see what could be done in terms of changing education. And from here, a program called WASP-ED, or WASP-ED, was born. And this is a program that is led from Linköping University. Frederick Heinz is the director of this program. And the aim of the program is really to increase the capability and the capacity of Swedish universities in, on one hand, providing timely and relevant educations so that we can get, for example, legal experts who are a little bit familiar with AI, but also in seeing how these technologies can be integrated into education. And I would say that the focus is, of course, in delivering or providing new content in education, but it's equally in helping people like myself and other education providers in changing the way that we teach and becoming aware of what the significance of these tools are. And just very shortly, so this program is divided up into a number of work packages, and I think it's worth just taking a moment to walk through some of them so you get an idea of what it is that we're trying to do within WASP-ED. So on one hand, we're looking at, so the first work package is on developing what we call a curriculum for AI education. So if you have any type of AI education, what are the basic building blocks that we would like to see? And how can we develop a taxonomy around the different courses that you need around AI? We also have a work package, actually this work package I lead, which is about program development. And here what we're doing is we're encouraging at least 3 universities to come together and to work on how you revamp new education programs with a little bit more AI in it. So for example, looking at a new legal sciences program and getting universities to collaborate, how can we insert AI in a meaningful way? Or for example, the new medical doctors program, how can that integrate AI in a meaningful way? We're also looking at some courses that can be developed where anyone could take them regardless of what kind of degree you're pursuing, as well as developing platforms and seeing how learning analytics together with AI can improve personalized learning. Then we want to also look at, and I just want to bring your attention to the yellow block, on how teaching competences can be increased. So within this work packages, they've been running a number of seminars that are directed towards university teachers, teaching them about not only the tools themselves, but how do you cope with forming your assessments, and how do you also work with, let's say, forming policies and routines, what constitutes cheating and what doesn't in your course. So this is an example of an initiative that's trying to take the bull by its horns, as we say in English, and really address the challenges that educators are currently facing as a result of these technologies, and doing it in a way that's very well integrated with state-of-the-art research by having teachers and researchers, interacting together. So I'll stop there, and I'll give the word back to you, Paulina.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. You can actually...
Then I'll come back up.
You can stay.
Okay.
And let's invite Christian and the students back on stage. And there's so many speakers I think all of you have referred back to Erik's talk. So let's invite Erik as well. That wasn't the plan, but we need you on stage. And Erik, I will actually start with you. So I'm putting you on the spot here.
Amazing.
So they've all sort of referred to your talk. Now you have a chance to refer back to their talks and sort of reflect on them. What are your thoughts on what you've heard so far?
Yeah, I was really thinking about top-down versus bottoms-up, and made that point, like where do you regulate in terms of like, well, first on a sort of subject matter level, but for example, like in like it's so easy to say, oh, this should be the policy of the U.S. or the AI Act should include this, but what are the talks about? Like you mentioned, Christian, that like now it's all the way down to the professors. Should it be there? Mm-hmm. Should it be there? Choice? Should we bump it up one? Should we bump it down to the students? Like, what is the appropriate level to take these decisions?
Or a combination. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's the right level, but we cannot leave teachers alone with that. And one easy way, for example, I mean, it's very practical. So I think that the worst thing you can do as a teacher is not talk about it at all. Yeah, so you need to find some way of relating to this. If you, for example, Uppsala University is very nicely done. They provide kind of templates in Canvas in the learning management system that teachers can use, adapted to their course, because it's very different depending on the learning objective, in what way it's meaningful or not meaningful to use generative AI. But helping teachers to adapt it and make these kind of decisions, I think that's something that's important.
So what type of combo is that? Sort of an AI, how to use generative AI in teaching?
Well, I mean, it's with the easiest example is the calculator. Yeah? So you would use, as was pointed out, you would use a calculator for pretty much all kinds of advanced engineering fields. But if you want to learn how to add and subtract, maybe it's not a good thing. Yeah? So depending what your course does, you might ask not to use it. Again, I think prohibition is not really enforceable, but you could try. In other ways, you might find ways helping students how to effectively use it. Yeah, and that's what's done. But if all teachers need to find their own solution, that I think is a little bit asking too much. Then we're back to Corona and transforming to digital education.
Yeah. And I think if we really want to open up Pandora's box, I think we should also ask ourselves what is the role of the teacher? And really maybe we need to reinvent the role of the teacher.
Yeah, isn't that what's sort of holding people back, really? Not the technology itself, but identity?
Yeah, it could be, and really asking ourselves, not only at the university level, but even when you push down in ages, what is the role of the teacher and what is the role of the educator? And I remember being a kid and being in a classroom and looking at your teacher and almost feeling that my teacher loves me and I love my teacher, in that sense that you have this very tight connection of mentorship.
So you had a good teacher then?
In certain ages, yes. Yeah. And I think at universities, perhaps we need to sort of rekindle that connection. And that means the teacher is more than the assessor or the examinator. And if we take that question, maybe all of these discussions about AI will come in its natural place.
Yeah. So let's hear from the students. Erik, you wait.
Yeah. I just thought about the experience during COVID as a student, that there was such a long time when, speaking about the concept of a flipped classroom. You give students the material beforehand to read up or to watch a video lecture, and then in class they ask the questions and everything. And my own experience at Uppsala University, and if anybody is representing Uppsala University, I don't mean to speak badly about it, but it was that nobody used it, or it was few teachers here and there who used that idea. And then COVID happened. And then suddenly people realized that speaking for 1.5 hours in front of when people are sitting at home, it's not the most effective way to teach this. So that forced the hand of the universities to change their approach. And I just want to sort of throw into the rest of the discussions here that this is the current level of these tools. But I think in 1, 2, 3 years, we're gonna, students and many, they're gonna be even more better user interfaces, better tools that are, everybody will have or everybody who wants to can have an AI virtual assistant. So I could have somebody who, an AI that could follow me all throughout university, knows all my courses, know how they relate to each other, knows me. And then we will have another conversation here in 2 years. So how do we not just react, but also think a little bit what's down the line?
Yeah, we talked about sort of one of my favorite tools right now is an AI tool that lets you sort of build a digital twin of your own knowledge base, your own brain. So, which makes it possible to sort of, you just save all the articles or podcasts or whatever that you read, and that's your knowledge base, and then you apply generative AI to it, and suddenly you can chat with your own brain, so to speak. And well, apparently I'm very sort of in love with my own thoughts or something, because I'm addicted. But that's sort of one way of looking at it, to create your own universe. Gabriel and Clara, I'm super excited, sort of curious to hear what your thoughts are about this, and sort of, we've spoken about what you can use generative AI for today, but I would love to hear your sort of vision of what would you like the role of teachers to be in the future? What would you like ChatGPT or generative AI, what type of role do you want generative AI to have in the future?
I think you should start, because I'm actually not a student anymore.
Oh, yeah.
So,
sorry.
you.
I didn't mean to insult you.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, so I'm not the typical tech student, but I want to learn more. What's the potential? Maybe as a course, and also I'm lacking of guidelines. What can I do, and what is okay, what is not okay, and how much can I use the AI tool and still be able to put my name on the assignment, and so that's a lot of what I'm thinking about.
But so, Gabriel, if you sort of still envision...
But for me, as not a student right now, it's very important for me how to be able to use AI in my professional work, how to use it on a regular basis while working. So then the lifelong learnings comes in place. That is so important, that I didn't have this opportunity to use generative AI when I was a student, but now I have the opportunity in my professional life to use generative AI. So there needs to be some kind of opportunity to always continue to learn about the generative AI and how you can use it as a professional, not only as a student, and to continue to learn even when you have graduated. Yeah. Because the perspective of a teacher, that might be the same as the perspective of a future boss or a future leader as well. Yeah.
So unfortunately, not everyone can attend great seminars like this and learn more about it.
Exactly.
And so what can we do about sort of the lifelong learning part of this? Like when people actually leave university or whatever education they attend, lifelong learning was sort of part of the model of WASP-ED. What do we have to do to make it happen?
There's a lot that needs to be done, and it's more than I say providing courses, right? It's also changing the structure and the delivery of how how Swedish academia or Swedish higher education works. And there are a lot of initiatives at the moment. I would even say there's a plethora of initiatives in seeing how we can tackle lifelong learning. I think there are still some things that we need to do to like untie the knots and loosen up the bottlenecks. For example, I think the way higher education is delivered today might need some policy changes because there are problems in the economical model that sort of make it hard for us to really go to the breadth of lifelong learners.
So the incentives.
In fact, both the incentives, but also the structures. The fact that once we propose a course, it takes sometimes 2 years before you can actually start delivering that course. That doesn't work for a working professional. They want to have things really on demand.
Exactly.
Then there's also the fact that we are all probably getting little tidbits of knowledge very implicitly when we watch YouTube or when we're working with certain tasks. How do we recognize that and validate that in an official system? There's a very long, long list of things to do.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was thinking about, I mean, it's not just learning about the tools as such. I mean, along with that, there comes a set of kind of generic skills that will be more and more important. Like, for example, critical thinking, being critical against the sources. And I mean, ChatGPT can be terribly wrong. So one needs to train that. And given our experience with social media, one could raise the question, particularly outside the universities, how we do that. So that's not going to be an easy. There's not going to be an easy solution to that. Yes.
So let's see if we have any questions in the audience. We've been sort of talking up here, but my guess is that you have, well, it's getting pretty late, but if hopefully your brains are still sort of thinking about these things. Do we have any questions?
Happy to shoot. Thanks for a nice seminar.
Ooh.
Thanks for a nice seminar. Erik Lindahl, KTH in Stockholm University. This is amazing in so many ways, and I have to confess I use ChatGPT for a lot myself. And yet, there is still a thing that worries me a little bit with higher education, because we pride ourselves as being scientists, but we frequently don't apply a very scientific attitude when it comes to evaluating teaching, right? And in general, whenever we invest in teaching, the students tends to like it, but it's usually just because we're investing in teaching, not necessarily because of the technology we're using. Part of me see a little bit of a worrying analogy. 20 years ago, the theme in Sweden was that we should use more screens, more iPads, more computers in school. And then 15 years later, we already that was a disaster because basic reading and reading comprehension, for instance, plummeted. So are we certain that this will not result in the same backlash in 15 years?
Any thoughts?
Well, I can answer. I mean, people might be disagreeing with me, but I mean, it's not even established that we're not just in the next hype curve. I mean, probably not. There's not much pointing to that. As you were pointing out, but if you look at, I don't know, 10 years ago, we had massive open online courses that were saying we're going to replace all the. I think it's simply too early to say how the future will look like. I do see a huge potential, in particular, replacing some of the weaknesses that we have in the educational system and advancing personalized learning, those kind of things. Yeah? So of course I see the potential, but it's hard to predict things, especially about the future. So that remains to be seen.
I'm not even sure we have agreed that kids reading less is a huge problem. Like, we made up, based on the views that we have because we grew up reading and we sort of apply our view on stuff, but I'm not even sure that's going to be sort of the wider perspective moving forward, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, but I think it's a good point. Can we bring a little bit more research into the way we deliver teaching? And, you could do a fun experiment where people in Uppsala get a chance to use ChatGPT and people in KTH don't, and then we see how they fare in life. So there's that ethical dimension of whether we can experiment or not. But I do think that we should integrate research and education tighter together, because I think we need to have a little bit more underlag, as you say in Swedish, in terms of the decisions we make. Yeah.
Just one minor remark to the question, though, is that maybe the difference here is that it's not the teacher's choice necessarily. Like it is out there, the tool is there, students can use it, they are using it, as we can see from Christian's survey. So it's not a matter of if, it's just sort of a how at this point.
And do you see any potential sort of knowledge gaps that may end up being a sort of a problem moving forward? Like the fact that kids don't read these days.
So I've been thinking about this for my own sake. Like, I'm very grateful to have it now because I've sort of, for me, I think I passed the sort of critical, you know, like the reading and like critical thinking, and like I can take the answers that they pop out and I can then like use my own brain as the filter, and I think it, like the answer we get together, me and the AI, is better than I could have done myself. Now, if I would have done 15 years of only sort of having the AI feed me the answers, and like that's how I would have learned, maybe this critical filter would never have come there. So like, for me, it's great, but I'm 29 years old, but I don't know for a 12-year-old if it's the same thing.
I'm trying to get my 13-year-old to use ChatGPT, and he says, no, we're not allowed to. And I'm like, come on, just one prompt.
School is a whole different business, because for students, you could expect that they reflect upon those. Schools is a little bit more problematic, I agree. But I just wanted to add another thought on that. I do think, coming from the field of education and technology, that we were running for many years, like, here's the next cool thing, and how can we motivate teachers to use it? But now, with this sudden wide usage, all this kind of critical and dangers came also on the radar. So I do think, also on the research front, in the AID literature, there is a more critical discussion about some of the implications, and that might be a good thing.
Yeah. We have some more questions in the back. Oh.
Yeah, to your point about critical thinking.
Oh.
To your point about critical thinking, I read something recently. It was not a study, but indications that the ability of critical thinking has decreased in Sweden. So I'm thinking the impact of critical thinking when we are using these tools so much, and especially when the tools themselves has hallucinations, etc.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that? I mean, the fact that I'm encouraging my 13-year-old to use ChatGPT is because I know I have the knowledge. I know enough about the platforms to be a good guide next to him. But I guess the problem, if we don't have parents, if we don't have teachers, etc., who understand these tools, then we can't develop a sort of sustainable way of using them either. Or am I wrong? Or right?
Well, I already stated that I share this kind of skepticism about the development of critical thinking as a whole. So that is indeed something to be worried about now. And not to, but I mean, there's other aspects that we have the sustainability that was very little addressed. I mean, how much energy it takes to run every kind of quest you put to ChatGPT. Yeah. So I reacted a little bit to that when you were kind of encouraged. Yeah. So there are big questions, but the good thing is they seem to come under agenda. So we have a discussion, and that I hope.
I can just address that point straight away. I'm studying AI also. It's very little. It's not like the blockchain or like the cryptocurrencies. It's almost like a Google search. Like when it's trained, it's a training that is the energy intensive and the problematic, if you want to call it. But like using the tool itself, it's very straightforward energy consumption wise.
But I think one aspect that's important with respect to critical thinking is I think we need to be better at marrying critical thinking and digitalization at younger ages. I think a risk is that we often see digitalization in school as being under the umbrella of math and tech, and it's not. It really sort of goes into everything. And if we could start talking about the ethical implications of algorithms to 10-year-olds so that they can actively adjust their feed and make them aware of how digitalization and AI impacts their life at a young age, maybe we would become more accustomed to having a very critical lens when it comes to the next flashy new AI gadget of the day, right? So I think it goes back to diversity as well, to not silo technology into being into only a very sort of narrow corner.
We have some more questions. We have two in the back, and then Anne. Yes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Simon Edström. I'm the former president for the Swedish National Union of Students and now a software developer developing AI agents. I just have one simple question, and that is, do you think universities in their current structure and way have any future in society given GPT? And if so, why?
You were thinking, you thought questioning teachers was the big thing, but you should question all of it.
I have quite some trouble. I mean, again, I was part of when MOOCs were a thing, all this big online courses, and was predicted. Now all the universities going to disappear. We're going to have and nothing happens. So there's something inherent to universities that is maybe not so apparent. So I'm not too worried that university is going to disappear. No, but I could be wrong, of course.
Yeah, I would say short answer, no. Long answer, yes. No, I think universities will still stay relevant. I see the concern I have is whether or not we will start to separate education and research a bit too much at universities. That university will be seen as kind of a natural rite of passage, the thing you do for many people after high school. And then the research is being done somewhere else. And I think you really have to bring those two together in order to ensure university relevance so that people want to go to university again, to look at that researcher and say, you're the expert, teach me. But maybe it's wishful thinking, I don't know.
Carl-Johan Sundberg, Karolinska Institute at one of the universities that may or may not be around in a while. But I do believe that the universities play a role beyond the pure delivery of knowledge, let's say, but especially in critical thinking and critical reasoning, because I think regardless of the ways we learn, I think the way we examine the knowledge needs to be through human dialogue as well. And I sense that, of course, students use the tools at hand, including AI these days, and many other tools. But it's fascinating to see also how textbooks, which were like obsolete in many people's minds, still are anchors in many ways. And I've written textbooks also for högstadiet and gymnasiet in biology, and the sales are going up. And that's a bit against the, let's say, expectation, and I'm talking about the paper copies. So, and it seems as if when I speak to teachers, that they really rely on backbone, solid, reasonably robust knowledge. The latest knowledge is not of very much interest at that stage, but the more, let's say, after the dust has settled knowledge. So what you find, which is very current, maybe, let's say, the likelihood it sticks is lower than you might think. So I was thinking about especially the way we examine medical doctors in the training program at Karolinska, for example. It's really, I think, obvious that we do too little of reasoning, and also that we examine it to a too little degree, I think. And when physicians then meet patients, or colleagues for that matter, they need to be able to reason, and not only maybe know or pick things out of the hat. They need to put things into context, into perspective. So I think we need to become better at the examination level. That's where I think the trick lies also.
And do you think that generative AI could be a way to accomplish that?
Possibly. It could be a new dialogue partner, of course. But I think we still need to maintain a critical view of any tool, I think. So we shouldn't just say, oh, we're salvaged in various ways. And I started a project some years back now called AI at KI, which has been led by Professor Magnus Boman from KTH, and we've really gone through, especially in the research side of things, but also in teaching, what do we need to do to, let's say, relate to this new technology and use it in the best way. So we're learning, but we're probably behind the engineering schools, I think.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Ann Lidgard. I'm at Vinnova, and I must say this is such a multifaceted discussion and multifaceted issue. First of all, I was just reminded of what somebody said, how important it is that we actually have citizens with Bildung. And Bildung is what's left when you forget everything you learned in school. And I think that's incredibly important, you know, with what's happening in social media and influencing campaigns and all that. But what I actually wanted to ask about, I mean, we talked a lot about AI now in higher education. I'm concerned really when it comes to high school and the elementary part of the elementary schools. The Marianne and Marcus Wallenberg Foundation program was extremely interesting. But are you aware of any other initiatives now to really bring the other part of our education system up to speed? Because I think that's really, I mean, I can see that as a huge challenge, given the way it's organized, you know, the responsibility of the municipalities, the resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have any insights on that, Amy?
No, I'm not aware of any sort of national initiative, and I think it's extremely important. And perhaps there are some, of course, there's probably some out there, but nothing that I know of. And one of the things that I'm concerned about as well is that, you know, given the amount of knowledge that we need, that we expect individuals to have now, I'm concerned that we actually will have to push AI further down the years, in the sense that right now we're teaching AI at usually third, fourth year university education, and I think it's going to have to go down in the years. And then the question is, how do we do that? How do we do that when AI actually starts to have to be learned by?
I guess my question there would be, like, how do we know what the kids actually have to learn? Because just a couple of years ago, we spoke about the fact that everyone in school has to learn coding because it's it's so fundamental to everything that we do today. And now suddenly ChatGPT can code for us, or generative AI. So what is sort of the minsta beståndsdel? What is that in English? Like the
lowest common denominator.
Yeah, exactly. What do we actually have to teach our kids to be prepared for the future?
Good question.
That's the whole grail.
Any
answers in the audience?
But what do the teachers need to know how to relate to these new technologies? Not necessarily, to teach them, but actually how to relate to them in their own teaching. And what is it really to I mean, more research into learning, maybe, rather than teaching.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Maybe like an attempt at sort of a direction of an answer, maybe like the level of coding that everybody should have is understanding enough to read the code that ChatGPT or something else outputs, and being able to, like, if you put the time in, you can critically examine it.
Yeah.
That's, we could say the same about reading.
Yeah.
Let's say, like,
so it's the critical thinking, not only when it comes to text and facts, but code as well, or math, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, one more.
I can continue the theme there. That first, I think that AI technologies are potentially exceptionally useful for university education too, right? But if we look worldwide, I would argue some of the most prestigious environments, say Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford, Harvard, on their most prestigious education, they're usually exceptionally conservative. It's like one teacher with 2-3 students sitting and discussing, and they've been doing it for 100 years, and I expect they will continue 100 years. And I think that's fine, but the challenge is that's limited. We can't scale that, right? So technologies like AI are great as the second best choice to expand this to like 2-3 orders of magnitude more students. And I think that's something we should do in Sweden too. But what we need to be a little bit careful of, don't replace these valuable interactions we have with the second best one, right? Because then I think we risk deteriorating the quality of education instead.
Mm-hmm. Any last comments?
I don't disagree with the point, but we shouldn't forget that the student population in Oxford is maybe not easily comparable with the student population that we have here at an average university. And that creates different preconditions that we need to consider. Even within a university, we have different preconditions. So.
Yeah. And that's a conversation, a whole conversation.
It's another topic that
we need another seminar.
Yeah.
As an engineering student at Uppsala, I had conversations with other people who studied business administration at Uppsala, and they were like, "Oh, wait, you have lessons with a teacher in the room, right?" So we are actually getting invested in like that teacher, that valuable teacher time, and they don't get that to the same degree. So, but this is a scarce commodity, right? Or like this is a scarce resource, and here we have a way to multiply it by some extent. That's interesting, I think.
Multiply is good. Remove not.
No.
So we actually have to wrap up. We can keep on discussing a bit in this room, but thank you, those of you, I actually forgot to mention, we have a virtual audience as well, quite a lot of people, so I hope you enjoyed the seminar, and thank you so much for making this so interesting. I've learned a lot, and I hope you have too. So a round of applause. Thank you.